The forest was silent. The only sound was the wind moving through tall trees. A man named Arik walked slowly, carrying a lantern in one hand and a bundle of rope in the other. He was a hunter, and tonight he wanted to catch something big. Not for food, not for trade, but for protection. The nearby villages were afraid of strange things happening at night. Animals were missing. Strange lights were seen above the trees. Some people whispered about demons, others said it was the gods, but Arik wanted proof. He set his trap carefully. It was strong, built with iron wires and sharp hooks. He had spent weeks preparing it. He placed it in a small clearing where the moonlight touched the ground. The air felt heavy as if something was about to happen. Arik's heart beat fast, but he kept his hands steady. He tied the rope to a thick tree trunk, checking it twice. Then he stepped back and waited. He sat on a fallen log, staring at the shadows. The night was colder than usual. Even the owls were quiet. It was not a normal night. Suddenly, the sky flashed with a strange light. It was not lightning, not fire, not anything he had seen before. The light was bright blue and silent. No sound of thunder, no smell of smoke. It spread across the clouds. Like water spilled on the ground, Arik stood up, his lantern shaking in his hand. His eyes widened as he saw something moving across the sky. A dark shape, fast and silent. It looked like a burning stone, but moved with purpose. The light followed, it covering the forest in strange shadows. Then came the sound. A deep roar, not like thunder, but heavier. It shook the ground beneath his feet. Leaves fell from the trees as if pushed by unseen hands. The shape in the sky broke apart, and one piece came crashing down. It fell into the clearing where Arik's trap waited. The rope snapped tight with a sharp noise. Arik froze, not believing what his eyes were seeing. The trap had caught something, but it was not an animal. Through the smoke and sparks, he saw a figure. It was a woman, or at least she looked like one. Her skin glowed faintly, silver under the moonlight. Her hair floated around her head as if under water. Her eyes were large and shining, not like human eyes. She was caught in the iron trap, struggling. Her voice cried out, but the words were not from any language Arik knew. The sound was soft, yet sharp, almost like music mixed with pain. She pulled against the ropes, her hands glowing, faintly. But the trap was strong. It held her tight. Arik's breath caught in his throat. He had expected a wolf, maybe a bear, but never this. He stepped closer, his lantern shaking. The woman turned her glowing eyes toward him. Fear spread across her. First she thought he was going to hurt her. Arik raised his hand slowly, showing he had no weapon. He whispered, "Easy, I will not harm you." But she did not understand. Her eyes grew wider, her voice trembling as she spoke in that strange language. Arik felt torn. Part of him wanted to run, to escape this nightmare, but another part of him was curious. What was she? Where did she come from? The villagers had been right. Something strange was moving in the skies, and now he had proof. But proof of what? The woman's body shook with fear. She tried to move away from him, but the trap cut into her skin. Arik noticed a thin line of glowing blood where the metal touched her arm. It shimmered like liquid light. He gasped, stepping back. This was no human. Yet, she looked fragile, almost helpless. Her breath came fast, her chest rising and falling quickly. Arik felt his heart pounding. She thought he was her enemy. But he was not. Not yet. The night grew darker. The strange blue light in the sky slowly faded. Only the lantern in Arik's hand lit the clearing now. The woman's glowing skin made the shadows dance. She whispered again, softer this time. It sounded almost like a plea. Arik knelt on the ground a few feet away. He placed the lantern beside him and spread his empty hands. He wanted to show he was not a threat. For a long moment, they stared at each other, hunter and captive, human and alien, two worlds meeting by accident. The forest around them was still, but Arik felt danger in the air. Something told him the night was not finished yet. Something else was out there, watching, waiting. The trap had caught more than he planned, and now his life would never be the same again. The forest whispered, with silence, Only the soft crackle of Arik's lantern broke the stillness. The strange woman was trapped, her glowing eyes wide with fear. She breathed quickly, pulling at the ropes again and again. Each movement made the trap cut deeper, glowing, blood sliding down her silver skin. Arik's chest tightened. He could not watch her suffer, but he also feared what she might do if she was free. He took a slow step closer. Her head snapped toward him, sharp and fast like a wild animal. She hissed words he could not understand. They sounded broken, sharp, and filled with warning. Arik froze, raising his hands again to show he meant no harm. But her fear was stronger than his gesture. She pulled harder, twisting, and sparks of light flickered around her arms. For a moment Arik thought she might break the trap with her strange power, but she only cried out, her voice trembling with both pain and rage. Arik knelt a few feet away. He placed the lantern low, on the ground, letting its light spread softly. The woman stopped pulling for a moment, watching him. Her eyes narrowed, uncertain. Arik slowly reached into his pack and pulled out a piece of bread. He placed it on the ground between them, then pushed it closer with a stick. She flinched as if he had thrown a weapon. But when nothing happened, she stared at the bread with suspicion. Her chest still rose and fell fast, her body tense. But hunger made her eyes linger. Arik spoke softly, though he knew she could not understand. "Food, see? Food, not danger." His voice was low, calm, like speaking to a frightened animal. The woman's glowing eyes moved from his face to the bread and back again. Finally, with shaking hands, she reached out. Her fingers touched the bread, holding it as if it might vanish. She smelled it carefully, then took a tiny bite. Arik saw her throat move as she swallowed. A small sigh escaped her lips. It was the first sound that was not filled with fear. Arik felt a spark of hope. Maybe she was not only fear, maybe she could trust him. But the next moment she pulled away again. Her body curled tight, her eyes sharp. She pointed at him and spoke in her strange tongue. Her words were fast, urgent, almost like questions. But he could not answer. The wall of language between them was thick. He only shook his head slowly, his palms open. "I don't understand you," he whispered. His voice carried sadness, though she could not know why. The woman leaned back against the trap. Her breathing slowed a little, though her eyes never softened. Arik studied her carefully, the way her hair shimmered, the glow under her skin. She was not just from another land. She was from another world. He felt a mix of fear and wonder. He wanted to ask her questions, to learn everything, but he also felt the weight of danger. If she was here, then what else was here? Hours passed slowly. The night air grew colder and Arik could see his own breath. He kept the lantern burning, though its oil was running low. The woman stayed awake too, never closing her eyes. Sometimes she glanced at the stars above, whispering words under her breath. Arik wondered if she was praying or calling for help. The thought sent a shiver through him. If someone, or something, was listening, they might come. And if they came, they would not like finding her in a human's trap. At one point, Arik dared to move closer again. He reached toward the ropes slowly, as if to loosen them. The woman's eyes widened, and she jerked back violently. A small burst of light flashed from her hand, striking the ground near his foot. Arik stumbled back, his heart racing. The soil smoked where the light had touched. He stared at it, his mouth dry. She had power, real power. One strike at his chest, and he would be gone. But she did not attack again. Instead, she curled into herself, trembling. Her power had come from fear, not hate. Arik realized something then. She was more afraid of him than he was of her. That thought changed him. Instead of fear, he felt pity. He sat back down, lowering his head. He whispered to himself, "She thinks I will hurt her, but I will not." The night dragged on, long and heavy. Both hunter and captive were caught in silence. The fire in the lantern dimmed and shadows grew taller around them. Somewhere in the distance, a branch snapped. Arik stiffened, his hand moving to his knife. The woman's glowing eyes widened too. Her body pressed low against the ground as if she sensed danger. The forest was no longer empty. Something was moving among the trees. Arik's eyes scanned the darkness. The woman whispered something urgent. Pointing with her bound hands, her voice shook with fear. But it was not of him this time, it was of something else, something outside the clearing. Arik felt his skin crawl. He tightened his grip on the knife, his ears straining. The forest had grown alive again. But it was not the safe kind of life. It was the kind that hunted. And in that moment, both man and alien knew. They were no longer enemies. They were two creatures trapped in the same danger. Fear connected them, and something in the shadows was waiting to test their fragile bond. The forest was dark and heavy. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound too sharp. Arik kept his knife ready, his eyes searching the trees. The woman in the trap pressed low, her glowing skin trembling. She whispered again in her strange tongue, pointing toward the woods. Though he could not understand the words, he understood the meaning. Danger was near. A faint rustle came from the left. Arik turned quickly, raising the lantern. Two yellow eyes shone in the dark, low to the ground. A wolf, its teeth flashing white. The beast growled, stepping into the clearing, its eyes locked on Arik, then shifted to the glowing woman. Arik's heart pounded. The wolf smelled weakness, smelled prey, and now the trap had given it both. The woman cried out, struggling again. Arik had no time to think. He stepped in front of her, knife raised. The wolf lunged, fast and brutal. Arik swung his blade, catching its shoulder. The beast howled, snapping its jaws near his arm. He kicked it back, his chest burning with fear. The wolf circled, ready for another attack. The woman's eyes glowed, brighter, her hands sparking with light, but the ropes kept her from helping. Her voice rose in a desperate cry. Arik stood his ground. The wolf leapt again. This time Arik rolled aside, stabbing upward. The blade pierced the beast's side. It crashed to the ground, whimpering before. Going still, Arik stood panting, his clothes torn, sweat on his forehead. The forest grew quiet again. But the silence was not peace. It was heavy, waiting. Arik turned to the woman. Her eyes were wide. Glowing tears along her cheeks, she looked at him differently now, not as only an enemy, but as something more. He lowered his knife slowly, then dropped it on the ground. He raised both hands empty. The woman stared, her lips trembling. For the first time, she did not pull away. She simply watched. Arik took a deep breath. He walked closer to the trap, kneeling near her. Her glowing skin shivered as he reached for the ropes. She made a soft sound, half warning, half question. Arik spoke gently. "I will help you, but you must trust me." She did not understand his words, but she understood his tone. Slowly, painfully, he loosened one rope. The metal hook fell away. The woman gasped, staring at her free arm. She rubbed it gently, glowing blood fading into her skin. Arik leaned back, waiting. She could have lashed out. She could have attacked. But she only looked at him with sharp, uncertain eyes. It was not trust. Not yet, but it was no longer pure fear. Arik pointed at himself, touching his chest. "Arik," he said, slowly and clear. Then he pointed at her, tilting his head. She blinked, confused, then whispered a soft sound. A name, perhaps. "Sael." Arik repeated carefully. "Sael." The woman's eyes softened just a little. He freed another rope, careful and slow each time he paused, giving her space to react. She watched every move, her body still tense, but she no longer tried to escape. Her glowing eyes stayed locked on him. Finally, the last rope fell loose. She was free. Yet she did not run. She stayed where she was, breathing hard. Her gaze moved to the dead wolf, then back to him. Something shifted in that moment. An unspoken agreement. She would not flee, and he would not harm her. The night grew, colder. Arik gathered wood and lit a small fire. Sael watched, her eyes reflecting the flames. She sat across from him, still cautious, but no longer fighting. Arik gave her water from his flask. She drank carefully, then nodded. It was the first sign of thanks, simple but real. Hours passed, neither spoke, but the silence between them changed. It was no longer fear alone. It was a fragile bridge. Each glance, each small act, building a wordless deal. Arik protected her from danger, and she, with all her strange power, chose not to destroy him. At one point, Sile lifted her hand. A small cut on Arik's arm still bled from the wolf's bite. She reached toward him slowly. Arik hesitated, but did not pull away. Her fingers glowed with soft light as she touched the wound. Warmth spread through his skin. When she pulled back, the cut was gone. Arik stared in shock. Sael only lowered her hand, her face calm but tired. The fire crackled. The stars shifted above the trees. Somewhere in the distance, strange sounds echoed. A hum, deep and unnatural. Sael's eyes widened, fear returning. She whispered urgently, pointing to the sky. Arik followed her gaze. A faint blue glow moved among the stars. Not natural. Not human. Something was searching. Sael pulled her knees close, trembling again. Arik looked at her, then at the sky. He understood nothing of her world, but he understood this much: she was running from something, and that something was coming closer. He tossed more wood into the fire. The flames rose, pushing the shadows back. Arik met her glowing eyes. A silent promise passed between them. He would protect her, and she would stay. It was not spoken, not written, but it was real, a silent deal made under the stars. The fire burned low, casting long shadows across the clearing. Arik sat with his back against a tree, his knife resting on his knee. Sael sat across from him, her glowing eyes reflecting the flames. For a time, neither spoke, neither moved. But the forest around them did not sleep. There were whispers in the trees, rustles in the grass, and the strange hum in the sky. Arik felt the weight of danger, yet he also felt something else. Curiosity. Sael lifted her hand, holding it close to the fire. The flames bent toward her as if drawn by an invisible force. Arik's eyes widened, his breath catching. She closed her palm slowly, and the fire shrank. When she opened it again, the flames leapt higher, brighter. Arik gripped his knife tighter, unsure if he was safe. But Sael's face was calm, almost gentle. It was not an attack. It was a display, a warning, and a gift. Arik whispered to himself, "What are you?" Sael tilted her head, hearing his tone but not his words. Her eyes softened, and she pointed at him, then at herself. It was a simple gesture, yet it carried meaning. "We are different, but we are here together." Arik nodded slowly. Though his heart raced, he felt no threat. He felt wonder. Later, as the night stretched deeper, Arik dozed off for a moment. The fire crackled low, and his head dropped against the tree. A sharp sound woke him, a branch snapping. He sat up quickly, knife in hand, but what he saw froze him in place. Sael stood near the edge of the clearing, her hands glowing with silver light. A broken branch lay at her feet, glowing faintly where she touched it. The wood mended itself before his eyes, cracks sealing, splinters smoothing. In seconds, it was whole again. Arik stared in disbelief. His mouth dry, she turned back, watching his reaction. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes searched his carefully. Would he fear her more now? Or understand? Arik lowered his knife slowly, showing no threat. His heart beat fast, yet his mind was steady. He whispered, "You heal things." Sael tilted her head again, not knowing the words, but she seemed to sense his calm. She walked closer and pointed at his arm, the place where the wolf had bitten him. Though she had already healed it, she touched it again gently. Her fingers glowed, sending warmth through his skin. The light spread, not just through the wound, but through his whole arm. Arik gasped softly, feeling strength return where there had been pain. Sael pulled her hand away, her face pale from the effort. She sank back to the ground, breathing hard. Arik stared at her, realizing the truth. Her powers came with cost. They drained her, weakened her. She was not unstoppable, not invincible. She was powerful, yes, but also fragile. Human in her own way, Arik felt something stir inside him. Not just curiosity, not just fear, but a strange sense of duty. If others were hunting her, it was not only because of what she was, it was because of what she could do, and powers like hers would never be left in peace. The forest grew restless again. Strange sounds carried on the wind. Not wolves this time, not animals, mechanical, sharp, metallic. Sail's eyes widened in alarm. She pressed a finger to her lips, urging silence. Arik nodded, crouching low. He doused the fire quickly with soil. Plunging them into shadow through the trees, lights appeared. Not lanterns, not torches. Blue beams sweeping across the ground, cutting through the night. Strange figures moved among the trees, tall and thin, with armor that glowed faintly. Their heads turned with inhuman smoothness, their voices buzzing like machines. Sail trembled, pressing close to the ground. Her fear was real, deep, shaking her whole body. Arik's heart sank as he realized. These were the ones she was running from. One of the glowing figures stopped near the clearing. It bent down, scanning the ground. Arik held his breath, gripping his knife, though he knew it was useless. Sail's hand brushed his arm, glowing faintly. Her eyes locked on his, pleading without words. Do not move. Do not fight. Stay alive. The figure's blue light swept over the broken trap, the wolf's blood, the scattered wood. It paused, scanning slowly. Then, with a strange hiss, it turned and moved on. Arik exhaled slowly, sweat dripping from his forehead. Sail's hand slipped, away from his arm, her glow fading. But in that moment, a bond was made. She had trusted him not to move, and he had trusted her warning. It had saved them both. When the lights disappeared deeper into the forest, Arik finally whispered, "They are hunting you." Sail lowered her head, closing her eyes. Her silence was answer enough. Arik looked into the dark trees, his jaw tight. He had thought she was a stranger, an intruder in his world. But now he understood. Her world was chasing her, and he was caught in the middle. The night air felt colder, heavier. The danger had passed for now, but it would return. Arik stared at the faint glow of her skin, at the power in her trembling hands. He did not know what fate had placed her in his trap, but he knew this. Whatever came next, he could not let her face it alone. The forest no longer felt safe. Arik could still hear the faint hum of the strange hunters in the distance. Their blue lights flickered through the trees like ghostly fire. Sail crouched beside him, her glowing skin dimmed as if she was trying to hide her own light. Her eyes darted from shadow to shadow, fear carved into her every movement. Arik tightened, his grip on his knife. Though he knew steel was nothing against what chased her, still he could not stand still, not when the danger was moving closer. Sail touched his arm suddenly. She pointed deeper into the forest, away from the glow of the hunters. Her voice was soft, urgent, her words unknown but her meaning clear. They had to move. Arik nodded once. The fire was gone. The clearing no longer safe. Together they slipped into the shadows. Every step was careful. Every sound too loud in the heavy silence. The night pressed around them, thick with danger. Branches cracked underfoot. Leaves brushed their shoulders. The forest that had once been familiar now felt strange and alien. Arik led the way, his lantern snuffed out, trusting only the faint moonlight. Sail followed close, her breath shallow. Sometimes her hand brushed his arm, a silent signal that she was still with him. The forest stretched endlessly, yet the hum of the hunters never faded. Sometimes closer, sometimes far, always circling, always searching. Then the first light swept across the trees. Arik and Sail dropped low, pressing themselves into the roots of an old oak. Blue beams cut through the night, sliding across the ground. Arik held his breath. Sail's hand trembled as she clutched the soil. The light passed just inches above them. For a heartbeat, Arik thought they were found, but the beam moved on and the shadow swallowed them again. They crawled through the roots and slipped farther into the dark. Arik's heart thundered with every step. He had hunted wolves and bears, but never had he been the prey, and this chase was unlike any hunt he had known. It was not only his life. At risk, it was hers, and she was the reason the hunters searched the forest. The weight of it pressed on him. Yet he did not turn away. Hours seemed to pass as they ran and hid again. The forest twisted around them, filled with strange lights and strange sounds. Once, Sail stopped suddenly, pulling Arik down. Ahead, one of the hunters stood in the path. Its armor gleamed with cold light, its face smooth and without eyes. In its hands was a weapon humming with energy. Arik froze, his body ready to fight, though he knew it would mean death. Sail whispered something sharp, shaking her head. Not fight, hide, wait. The hunter scanned the path slowly, its head turned. With unnatural stillness, Arik could hear the faint hum, could feel the vibration in his chest. He held his breath so long his lungs ached. The machine shifted, then moved away, disappearing into the trees. Only when the sound faded did Arik let out a long, shaky exhale. Sail touched his arm again, her eyes filled with gratitude. No words, only silence, but the silence spoke enough. The night deepened, but the chase did not stop. Everywhere they turned, blue lights glowed. The hunters moved in a circle, narrowing the forest. It was not random. It was a trap. Arik realized too late that they were being herded, forced into the center, with fewer places to run. His jaw tightened, sweat dripping down his face. He had to think, had to find a way. At last they stumbled into a rocky clearing. Tall stones rose from the ground like broken teeth. Arik knew this place, an old ruin left from forgotten times. He had played here as a child. Now it might be the only place to survive. He pulled Sail toward the largest stone and motioned for her to crouch behind it. She obeyed, her body trembling with exhaustion. Her glow was faint, flickering. She had used too much of her strength already. Arik scanned the clearing. The hunters were coming closer, their lights dancing across the stones. He had only his knife. His traps were far away. But he had one weapon left, his mind. He began to move rocks, breaking branches, setting small snares with rope and stone. His hands moved fast, his body guided by instinct. If he could not defeat them with power, he would defeat them with cunning. Sail watched him, her glowing eyes filled with fear and wonder. She spoke softly, her voice breaking. Arik could not understand the words, but he understood the meaning. She was asking why. Why? He risked himself for her. Arik looked at her, his jaw tight, his breath steady. And though she could not know the words, he said them anyway. Because you are not my enemy. The first hunter entered the clearing, its light sweeping across the stones. It moved slow, precise, certain of its prey. Arik crouched low, ready. His knife in hand, Sail pressed her back against the stone, eyes wide. The hunt was no longer a search, it was a chase closing to its end. And Arik knew the next moment would decide everything. The clearing felt like a cage. Tall stones closed them in, and the hunter's lights drew closer with every passing breath. Arik's traps were set, crude but clever. Loose rocks balanced above narrow paths, ropes tied to roots, sharpened stakes hidden in shadows. It was not enough to defeat the hunters, but maybe enough to slow them. And slowing them might mean survival. Sail crouched behind the largest stone, her glow faint, her body trembling. She had given too much already, healing him, bending the fire, hiding her light. Now she was weak, and the fear in her eyes was raw. Arik knelt beside her for a moment, placing a hand on his chest. He pointed to himself, then to her, then to the dark forest. His meaning was simple. If they fought together. Sail's eyes shimmered with tears. She shook her head, whispering words he could not understand, but he felt their meaning. She did not want him to fight. For her, she did not want him to die. The first hunter entered the clearing. Its blue light swept across the stones, pausing on the dead wolf's blood still staining the dirt. Another figure followed, its weapon humming with a low, deadly sound. The air grew heavy, buzzing with their strange voices. Arik gripped his knife tighter, his breath slowed, his heartbeat loud in his ears. He was only one man with steel and stone, but he was also human. And humans had always fought best when there was no choice left. The hunters moved forward, their lights scanning the ground. One beam stopped on the broken rope from his trap, another on the marks of his boots in the dirt. Their heads turned, slowly, and then both beams locked onto the stone where Sail hid. Sail gasped, Pressing back, Arik stepped forward, his knife raised. For a moment, time froze. The hunters faced him, their voices buzzing in unearthly tones. One raised its weapon, the blue light glowing brighter. Arik shouted, his voice raw. He slammed his foot against a hidden rope. A stone above crashed down, striking one hunter's arm and knocking its weapon aside. The other stepped forward quickly. But Arik swung his knife, sparks flying as the blade struck its armor. The weapon hummed, slicing into the ground where he had stood a heartbeat earlier. Arik rolled aside, panting, his chest burning. His traps were working, but barely. He was only slowing them, and more were coming. Sail's glow brightened suddenly. Her hands lifted, trembling but fierce. A surge of light burst from her palms, striking the nearest hunter. The creature staggered, its armor glowing red where her energy burned into it. But the light drained her. She collapsed against the stone, gasping for breath. Arik caught her before she hit the ground. Her body shook with weakness, yet her eyes locked on his. Desperate, pleading, she wanted him to run, to leave her. Her mouth shaped one word clearly. Go! Arik froze. Every instinct screamed at him to survive, to escape. But something inside him was louder. The memory of her healing touch, her trembling trust, the unspoken deal they had made under the stars. He looked at her fragile form, then at the hunters, closing in, and the choice came to him clear and sharp. Run and live a coward, or fight and die human. Arik stood tall, his knife ready. No, he whispered, though she would not understand the word. He pulled her behind him, shielding her with his own body. The hunters advanced, their weapons humming, their lights blinding. Arik moved fast, kicking another rope. A hidden stake swung down from the stones, slamming into one of the hunters. The creature fell back with a hiss, its light flickering. But the second came forward relentless, weapon raised. Arik's eyes narrowed, his breath steady. If this was his end, he would face it standing. The hunter struck. Arik dodged, the blade of light missing his chest by inches. He slashed with his knife, sparks flying uselessly against its armor. The creature lifted him by the throat, its grip cold and unyielding. Arik gasped, his knife falling from his hand. Sail cried out, her glow flaring bright. With the last of her strength, she pressed her hand to the hunter's arm. Light surged, burning through the metal. The creature shrieked, dropping Arik to the ground. Arik coughed, grabbing his knife again. With one final desperate strike, he drove it into the exposed joint of the hunter's neck. The creature fell, its light fading. Silence crashed over the clearing. Only Arik's ragged breath and Sail's soft whimpers filled the air. The hunters were down, but more would come. Arik knelt beside her, his body bruised, his hand bleeding. She looked at him with wide, trembling eyes. Her lips moved, whispering a single word again. Protector. Arik stared at her, his chest heavy. In that moment, the choice was complete. He had chosen her, chosen to fight, chosen to stand, not for reward, not for glory, but because it was human. The night was not over. More lights flickered in the distance, more voices buzzed on the wind. Arik tightened his grip on his knife. Sail leaned weakly against him, her glow faint. The fight was not finished, but neither was his choice. He would protect her until the very end. The clearing was silent for only a breath. Then the forest came alive again with the hum of machines. Blue lights flickered between the trees. Closer now, sharper. More hunters were coming, drawn by the fall of their own. Arik stood tall, his chest burning, his knife slick with blood. Beside him, Sail leaned weakly against the stone, her glow faint as a dying flame. They had survived one fight, but the night was not finished. Arik's mind raced. He could not face them head-on. Steel and courage would not be enough against an army. But cunning, patience, and the forest itself, those were weapons he knew. He had grown in these woods, learned their secrets as a boy. Now those secrets might save them both. He helped Sail to her feet. She stumbled, but her eyes held his with quiet strength. Her body was fragile, but her will had not broken. Arik guided her deeper into the rocks, hiding her in a narrow gap. He pressed a hand to her shoulder, meeting her eyes. Stay, he whispered, though she could not understand. She touched his chest with trembling fingers, her lips shaping that one word again. Protect her. Then she let him go. Arik moved quickly, setting more traps. He pulled ropes from his pack, tied them to stones. He dragged branches to cover paths, dug shallow holes with his bare hands. Every step hurt. His body screamed from battle, but his mind stayed sharp. This was no longer a hunt. It was war. And war was fought not with strength, but with will. The first hunter entered the clearing. Its blue light scanned the ground. Arik crouched in the shadows, waiting. When the creature stepped on the wrong patch of soil, the ground gave way. It fell into a pit lined with sharpened stakes. Its hiss of pain cut through the night. Another hunter turned quickly, but Arik pulled a rope. A heavy stone swung down from above, slamming into its chest. The forest echoed with the crash. The others advanced faster now, their lights cutting across the stones. Arik moved like a shadow. Striking and vanishing, he was only one man. Yet he was everywhere, knocking branches loose, guiding the forest to fight with him. One hunter fell to a swinging log, another tangled in rope, still more pressed forward, weapons glowing. The night became a storm of light and shadow. Arik's breath came ragged, sweat and blood stinging his eyes, but he did not stop. Not while. Sail watched from the stones, her hands pressed together as if praying. At last, 3 hunters cornered him near the broken oak. Their weapons hummed, their blue glow painting the ground. Arik's knife felt small, almost laughable in his hand. But his eyes burned with fire. He charged, not with fear, but with fury. He slashed one across its joint, ducked under another's strike. The third raised its weapon, but Arik rolled aside. The beam cut through the oak, sparks flying. Arik kicked the trunk hard. The great tree groaned, splitting at the cut. It fell, with a thunderous crash, crushing 2 hunters beneath its weight. The last one turned, its voice buzzing, its weapon raised. Arik stumbled, his strength nearly gone. But then a flash of silver light burst across the clearing. Sail had stepped. From the rocks, her hands glowing, her body trembling, she poured the last of her power into the hunter. Its armor glowed red, cracking under the force. It shrieked, staggering. Arik saw his chance. With a roar, he leapt forward and drove his knife deep into the exposed seam. The hunter fell silent, its light fading to nothing. Silence returned at last. The forest held its breath. Only the crackle of the broken tree and the sound of 2 beating hearts filled the air. Arik dropped to his knees, his chest heaving. His knife fell from his hand, useless now. Sail stumbled toward him, her body weak, her glow almost gone. She knelt beside him, her trembling hand touching his face. Her lips curved into a small, fragile smile. For the first time, her eyes were not filled with fear but with trust. Arik whispered, though she would never understand the words. It's over. Sail leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. Together they watched the forest, waiting for another light, another hum, but none came. The hunters were gone, at least for now. The night belonged to them again. Above, the stars burned bright. Arik looked up, his mind heavy with questions. Where had she come from? Why had they hunted her? Would more follow? But answers would not come tonight. All that mattered was the choice he had made. He had protected her not because she was powerful, not because she was different, but because she was alive. And that was enough. Sail stirred, whispering softly. Her voice was weak, but her word was clear. Protect her. Arik closed his eyes, holding her steady. He felt the weight of exhaustion, the ache of battle. Yet in his heart he felt something stronger, a fire no weapon could break, the fire of being human. The forest stretched endless around them, the future uncertain, the danger not gone. But for this night, they had survived, man and alien, bound by trust, and in the end, it was not power, not machines, not weapons that won. It was courage, it was choice, it was humanity.